Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Tropicana Field, home of your Tampa Bay Rays. It's 95 degrees outside and you cannot...
Tampa Bay, I am the sworn enemy of all that is good in baseball. Today you will pay the price for your loyalty to the game and the Devil Rays.
While 2004 was the most promising season in Devil Rays history, a 70-win season typically doesn't warrant optimism. The hope that fans possessed stemmed from the young developing core of hitters. Entering the offseason, the front office decided not to run it back with the same group of veteran role players. Tino and the slick-fielding Ray Sanchez left in free agency, and Jose Cruz was dealt to Arizona. Robbie Alomar, Hideo Nomo, and Danny Nagel signed one-year deals, and Travis Lee was brought back to replace Tino. The concept remained the same: develop the young talent and plug the holes with cheap short-term vets. Unfortunately, plans changed early in the offseason. While playing baseball with his family in November, Rocco Baldelli partially tore his ACL, meaning that he would miss at least the first half of the season. Baldelli served as a middle-of-the-lineup bat and a great defender in center field. Knowing that adequately replacing him would require some time and money, the front office decided instead to cheap out. They signed a 31-year-old Damon Hollins who had played just 15 career MLB games to be the primary center fielder. But that wasn't the only setback the team faced before the regular season began. Alomar was forced into early retirement during spring training due to serious vision problems, leaving a chasm at the keystone position. To plug this new hole, reliever Jorge Sosa was flipped to Atlanta right before the season for Nick Green, who was just a replacement level player. The salt in this wound was that Sosa had a breakout season as soon as he left Tampa. Despite these setbacks, the lineup was still pretty solid. Johnny Gomes became a regular in the lineup starting in June, and he crushed the ball for the rest of the year. Alex Gonzalez had a respectable year as the new third baseman, and Jorge Cantu hit well as a utility infielder. The big issue with the 2005 team was once again the pitching staff. Outside of Kazmir, who had a very good first full season at just 21 years old, the rest of the starters were horrible. Nagel never made the roster, and he would never make it back to the majors again due to injuries. 6 starters other than Kazmir made at least 8 starts, but only one of them had an ERA under 5.5. Jesus Christ. The bullpen was absolutely abhorrent as well. Baldelli's bad luck continued throughout the year as he tore his UCL in what's been described as a freak weight room injury. His year was officially done, but even if he had a healthy, MVP-type season, it's hard to imagine the lineup carrying this pitching staff any higher than 70 wins. The onus of this team's failure to take the next step was certainly not on the players or Piniella. Lamar's inability to find cheap talent, paired with the ownership's relentless penny pinching, stagnated the young core. Namoli was in the process of selling the majority stake in the team to the minority ownership group led by Stuart Sternberg, who was already making the decisions on where to allocate the funds. Piniella took issue with Namoli failing to keep his promises to increase payroll, but he was even more distraught with how Sternberg looked past the present talent towards the future. Lou wanted desperately to win with his team, and I don't blame him. When he took the job, he was told that payroll would increase as the team got better, but after improving by 15 wins in his first 2 seasons, he was still in charge of the cheapest roster in the league with an even lower payroll than the previous year, and the players agreed with their manager. Huff, Lugo, and Crawford all agreed that the front office wasn't doing enough to win. Once Sternberg took over at the end of the season, Lou was bought out of his contract and the front office was completely cleared out. Lamar's final draft with the team netted Jeremy Hellickson, but not much else. After 8 long, arduous seasons, the Devil Rays had moved past their first GM, owner, and 3 different managers. Andrew Friedman may have just been assigned the toughest GM job in any sport, and he was just 28 years old. His team-building philosophy was the most analytical and progressive in all of baseball. Despite a clubhouse packed with young talent, the young GM had to bring in a new front office staff, find a new manager, and deal with low clubhouse morale, all while keeping a cheap payroll. He certainly had his work cut out for him. But in mid-November, Tampa found its next manager, a man who would outlast his previous 3 predecessors' tenures combined.
I don't want to stand there and make or try to force you to act a certain way, because I really believe I'm not going to get the best out of you as a baseball player if I do that. I have one rule among the position players. I want you to run hard to first base. That's it.
Ty Wigginton, Russell Branyan, and Greg Norton were this year's batch of vets to fill out the batting order, and starter Edwin Jackson was acquired via a trade with the Dodgers. The new regime didn't do much more than this during the offseason, and the payroll remained amongst the lowest in all of baseball. Despite an 11-14 start in April, the team's hopes at playoff contention were pretty much dashed by the end of a dreadful May. Friedman's first draft as Tampa's GM was probably the best draft class in team history at the time. On June 6th, he picked up Evan Longoria, Alex Cobb, and Desmond Jennings, amongst others. But while on-field performance improved throughout June, they were still 10 games under 500 and a dozen games out of a playoff spot. Huff and Lugo were both pending free agents making decent arbitration money, so Huff was shipped off to Houston and Lugo was traded at the deadline to the Dodgers, who had also traded for catcher Toby Hall about a month earlier. Tampa received Deoner Navarro in the Hall deal as their new starting catcher. The Huff deal netted a couple of minor leaguers, including a young infielder by the name of Ben Zobrist. Just a year and a half ago, it looked as if the rebuild was nearing an end, but another slow start brought about another deadline as sellers. The second half of the season was dreadful, as the team mustered just 22 wins after the All-Star break. The lineup progressed overall, especially after the trades were made. Even though Baldelli was back and hitting as well as ever, the bottom half of the lineup just couldn't get the job done. The only real bright spot was Josh Hamilton returning to the field after staying off drugs since the previous October. His wife and 2 kids accompanied him on the road to help him fight his demons, and he played in 15 games at low A before getting knee surgery and sitting out the rest of the year. While he wasn't yet back into form, the team was trying their best to help guide his career back on track. Josh's return was a feel-good story, a dream come true, but while this was going on, Delmon Young's season at AAA was basically a nightmare. Coming off a season in which he won Minor League Player of the Year at just 19 years old, Delmon dreamt of making the big league club in spring training. I'll let him tell you most of the story himself.
It was 06, just coming off Minor League Player of the Year. And, we're talking about, they can compete for a spot in spring training. Ooh, that's all I've been trying to do forever. So, go down there, spring training. Hey, we just need you to go down there and have some plate discipline.
When he was sent down late in the spring and told to see more pitches and draw more walks, he was frustrated. He believed that he'd shown more than enough to earn the starting job in right field over Damon Hollins, and he was probably right.
So I'm like, alright, I could take some pitches, whatever.
On April 26th, a replacement ump was calling the game between the Durham Bulls and Paw Sox.
They had to go hire just regular umpires from Little Leagues, high school leagues.
On a 1-2 count, the ump punched Young out on a pitch way outside. Delmon didn't like working the count. He would rather jump on the first good pitch to hit and slug it into the gap. So when he tried working the count just for the ump to help the pitcher out, he understandably protested. Eventually, he said some magic word and the ump had heard enough.
He says, "Get the F out of my batter's block." I'm like, what? I said, what the fuck? That are your horse crap? Yo, I said, get the fuck out of here.
Delmon was ejected as he was walking back to the dugout. Facing the pressure of being picked first overall, a brother who had been in the league for years, a team who he felt didn't respect his ability, criticism of his approach at the plate, and one bad call, Delmon cracked.
As I'm walking away, and I tossed it backwards, and when I looked behind, I just see this straight in my chest, and I was like, yeah, just go to the clubhouse, man.
He says he never meant to aim at the ump, he just wanted to make an example and fling his gear towards home plate. And he says he threw his bat backwards without looking. And I believe him. Everyone who knows him personally says he's a great guy with a kind heart, but public opinion declared him a thug who was emotionally immature. Yet another Devil Rays prospect without the intangibles to back up his otherworldly talent. He received a 50-game suspension and served it without question, apologizing to the ump and his teammates the next day. After serving the suspension, he returned to form, swiping bags, hitting over 300, and smacking extra base hits. He was promoted near the end of the season and played well in 30 games for Tampa, despite drawing just 1 walk. Delmon never quite shook the reputation that he established as a frustrated and mentally strained 20-year-old, a reputation that would always be present as the reason for any struggles or failures in the future. This reputation enforced the narrative that the Devil Rays couldn't avoid bad eggs and didn't know how to keep watch over their young talent.
What's going on? This is sweet. I'm getting jacked.
Fellas, I'm giving you the energy force of baseball, or what we call the zone. You are now the defenders of the game.
The dwindling number of fans most certainly felt apathetic about this team by 2007. The young core of the lineup from a few seasons earlier was still playing well, but the team was in the midst of a seemingly never-ending rebuild. Watching Hamilton leave as a Rule 5 selection and have an excellent season in Cincinnati made 2007 all the more frustrating. Were there really 40 other players in the organization that were better than him? Dustin Moore needed to be on the roster that badly? Maybe letting him go was the best for his career, but watching your most talented prospect ever struggle year after year with his vices just to become a fantastic player the second he leaves town is just depressing. Just take a look at this potential lineup with Josh in the outfield. Although losing him right before he broke out absolutely sucks, the offseason as a whole wasn't that bad. Akinori Iwamura and Brendan Harris were acquired cheaply but played big roles as new pieces of the infield. Upton was expected to start at second base, but as Baldelli suffered continuous hamstring injuries, Upton moved out to center. While Baldelli's hamstring troubles were an issue, the true concerns arose as he was rehabbing. He constantly felt muscle fatigue even after light workouts. Doctors didn't know what was specifically wrong with him. The most mortifying aspect of life is a situation just like this. Rocco didn't know whether or not he'd ever be back on the diamond. He was just 25 years old, and his profession, identity, and long-term physical well-being were all uncertain. In June of 2021, Rocco spoke about Byron Buxton's constant injury issues. As Buxton's manager, he has a unique perspective on how injuries affect an athlete both physically and mentally, and he discussed how depressed he was when he was struggling through these injuries and illnesses.
For him, I feel immensely for him and what he's going through. This is very tough on anyone. We were talking about roller coaster of emotions and having to deal with things that no one should have to deal with what Buck is going through right now.
The same question that's asked about Buxton's career now was being asked about Rocco's career back in 2007. What if he could just stay on the field? Both have unmatched talent, both have unwilling bodies. Rocco was eventually diagnosed with a mitochondrial abnormality, but it was not clear how to treat it or if he would ever be healthy enough to play again. He once looked like the franchise player, the man to lead the Devil Rays into their first great era. Unfortunately, the team's trajectory paralleled Rocco's sputtering career, and uncertainty marred both him and his franchise throughout the season. Manager Joe Madden continuously preached patience with his young talent, and the lineup once again displayed its potential, but the pitching staff was still one of the worst in baseball. James Shields broke out as the second ace on the staff, and Kazmir kept up his exceptional play, but just as always, the rest of the rotation and bullpen weighed the team down. 5 separate relievers threw at least 40 innings and finished with ERAs above 7. In late July, after another rough stretch of losing, Ty Wigginton, Seth McClung, and a struggling Jorge Cantu were shipped off in 3 separate trades. Grant Balfour and old friend Dan Wheeler were brought in to shore up the bullpen as parts of these deals. While it was quite clear that this year's team wasn't cut out for contention, at least the front office recognized the team's strengths and weaknesses. Each of the acquisitions they brought in during the offseason were successful. Iwamura and Harris were solid bats on the left side of the infield, and Carlos Pena was a beast at the plate. Wait, I haven't talked about Pena yet? Wait, hang on, you guys gotta see this. Carlos just barely made the roster after signing a minor league deal during the offseason. After he was reassigned to minor league camp as one of the final roster cuts, Greg Noren suffered an injury on the last day of spring training and Pena signed with the big league club. He went on to finish 9th in MVP voting and was named Comeback Player of the Year. It was the first and only award a Devil Ray ever won. Before I get to anything else though, I have to talk about rookie outfielder Elijah Dukes. I mentioned him a little while back. He was drafted in 2002 and put up impressive numbers across 3 minor league seasons leading up to this year. In that same span of 3 years, he also had 5 kids with 4 different women. But this barely scratches the surface of his off-the-field troubles. He started in center field on opening day with Baldelli sideline, and he homered in each of his first 2 games, both at Yankee Stadium. But by mid-season, his teammates and manager weren't answering questions about him and allegedly weren't speaking to him. He had a history of arrests and suspensions, but the final straw with the organization was threatening his wife's life. But hang on, let's rewind. Back in 1996, Elijah's father was arrested for second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Elijah's first arrest came a year later when he was just 13. Living as a troubled teen with a poor family and incarcerated father, baseball was his only outlet, but being drafted to his hometown team may not have been best for him. It became increasingly more difficult for him to stay out of trouble off the field, and he took out his anger on his wife. They had both been in legal trouble for abusing each other, but after Elijah sent his wife a picture of a handgun and threatened her and her children's lives over the phone, she sought a restraining order, and the Devil Rays placed him on the inactive list. In June, he played his last game for Tampa. While some teammates publicly prayed for him and expressed their desire for him to get help, others wanted nothing to do with him. The franchise got him help for his mental health problems, but it was better for both parties to move on from each other after the year. So what? Another troubled prospect failed. So what? Another year under 70 wins. So what? Another league-low payroll. So what? Strife in the clubhouse. So what? More than ever, the talented young core looked just a few steps away. But why couldn't the progress be made? Was the Devil and Devil Ray really just some type of bad omen that needed to be expelled? Well, maybe. Just maybe.
Fellas, a new villain has come to our attention. Check this out.
Man, who's that guy? That guy is Dr. Snap.
Is he anything like Dr. Phil?
Dr. Snap became obsessed with useless baseball trivia. Now, he uses his knowledge to try to destroy the game.
I'm sure that anyone who's watching this knows what happens next. After years of toiling in the basement of the stacked AL East, with owners unwilling to spend, a dwindling fan base, and overall poor management, 2008 brought about a new era of Tampa Bay baseball. They dropped the devil from their title, and they were just the Rays. Rays of Sun, I heard Florida has those. Along with their new look came a host of new faces. They let a bunch of mediocre players walk in free agency and made some eye-opening moves. Delman Young and Brendan Harris were traded to Minnesota after solid seasons. Jason Bartlett and Matt Garza came back in return in an effort to improve the rotation and infield defense. Troy Percival and Cliff Floyd both signed one-year deals. Both had won a World Series ring in the past, and both brought a veteran presence to a still young clubhouse. The team's offense actually finished with less runs scored and a lower production overall than in 2007, but their pitching went from the worst in the AL to the second best. They finally had a solid 5-man rotation, rounded out by the Garza addition and improved years from Edwin Jackson and Andy Sonnenstein. Joe Madden managed the bullpen exquisitely, getting the best out of Wheeler, Balfour, J.P. Howell, and more. Third baseman Evan Longoria slugged his way into Rookie of the Year honors, Ben Zobrist finally figured it out at the plate, and Rocco Baldelli made his triumphant return to the field as a DH. Madden's bizarre managerial techniques produced winning stretches, shook cold streaks, and brought the clubhouse morale to an all-time high. I'm not going to really dive in deep to his excellence as a manager, just know a few things. He shaved his hair into a mohawk to match some of his players after losing the first game of a big series against Boston. He issued a bases-loaded walk to Josh Hamilton rather than daring to pitch to him, and he frequently used the shift against pull hitters before it was cool. He was baseball's one and only hippie manager.
I'll just give you quickly Johnny Chalice's shirt. John's the young man that passed away from cancer this year, and so you got courage on both sides. Courage plus believe equals life was his slogan, and that dollar bill on the bottom there, he signed for me because I fined him $1 for calling us the Devil Rays. I don't keep a lot of things. A lot of these things may get lost at some point. That'll never get lost.
While Piniella is a legend, Madden's style is nearly the opposite, and he ushered in a completely new approach to in-game strategy and off-field morale building not only in Tampa, but across all of baseball. Joe believes that the energy surrounding his teams impacts their performance. It's as if the negative energy of the Devil Ray was the only thing stopping this team from winning. Once the old name and identity were left in 2007, the organization's luck turned around seemingly by magic. On August 10th, they set the franchise record for wins in a season, and the attendance numbers jumped to their highest level since the inaugural 1998 season. To reach the peak of this magical year, and thus the peak of the franchise as a whole, we must quickly look back at the 2007 draft. Matt Moore and Stephen Vogt were both solid selections who are still playing today, but the main prize came first overall. For the third time in a decade, Tampa had the first overall selection, and for the first time, they got it right.
Ground ball to second. Iwamoto's got it. Rays are going to the World Series.
Well, I don't quite know how to wrap this up. To anyone who's here and subscribed because of this series, I want to tell you a bit about myself. First of all, I'm a Yankees fan, despite the hours and hours I've spent trying to articulate my feelings about the history of Rays baseball. Second of all, this experience has been so much fun, and I seriously appreciate all the kind words I've been seeing in the comments. Like I've said on Twitter, follow me there by the way. I'm currently at school, so I won't be making as much as fast, but I have tons of other ideas for videos that I'll be working on soon, so be sure to subscribe if you like the series. In the few months that I've been doing this, I feel like I've improved a lot, and I really hope you stick around because the best has yet to come.